Hey everyone, welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I am the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. Merry holidays. It's almost Christmas and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa all together. And as a gift to you, I got you an interview with Mikal Cronin. Ugh, sorry, by the way, about my voice. I am coming down with something and about to travel. So tomorrow is going to be fun. I'm going to be flying with a cold and a dog. So looking forward to that. Actually, I'll tell you what I am looking forward to. Whatever movies are playing on JetBlue. And I'm looking forward to you hearing today's episode. If you don't know who Mikal Cronin is, why don't I give you his bio? Originally from Laguna Beach, musician Mikal Cronin has been playing music professionally for almost a decade as a member of bands like Ty Segall, The OCs, King Tuff, Shannon and the Clams, and many more. He's also been playing bass in Ty Segall's touring band for the past 8 years. On his own, he's recorded 4 albums, Mikal Cronin, self-titled Mikal Cronin on Trouble in Mind Records, as well as MC2 and MC3, which were both released by Merge. And Merge also released his latest album, Seeker, at the end of October. I heard Seeker. I had never really heard Mikal before. I don't know a whole ton about the Los Angeles / California psych rock scene. But I heard Mikal's new album, and it is so good. And then I had the opportunity to interview him, and I jumped at it. And this is interesting. We have a similar background and kind of outlook on life. Also, Mikal had just gotten back from a 3-week tour the day before we recorded this. And I was tired as well, so we're both a little low energy, but I think we talk about some really interesting stuff. By the way, if this is your first time listening to Beginnings, thank you for checking out the show. If you would like to check out other episodes, all of them are on Spotify, or you can download them at beginnings.libsyn.com. You can grab some at random. You can wade through them to find someone you might be interested in, or I could recommend some people to you. There's 400 some odd episodes plus bonus episodes, so there's a lot. Why don't I recommend, if you like Mikal Cronin's music, I've talked to people like, let's see here, Mitski, Tim Kinsella, Tim Kasher, Rachel Brown from Field Mouse, Nick Thorburn from Islands, Mira, Antarctico Vespucci, Cassie Ramone from the Vivian Girls, Sadie Dupuis of Speedy Ortiz, Colleen Green, Colin Newman from Wire, and a ton of other people, including many writers and comedians and actors and artists. So check out those episodes. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can do it on Apple Podcasts, on Stitcher, on Google Play, on Spotify, and many other places. And I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Andy Beckerman. And I think that's about it. Hope your holidays are great. And 10th anniversary of the show coming up. I am hopefully going to have something fun for that. All right. Thanks for listening. And now, let's talk to Mikal. I don't need to be on, have traveled in Europe for 3 weeks and then flown back and been jet lagged to be out of it and tired. That is my natural state.
It helps though, yeah.
Yeah. But that's a built-in excuse for you in terms of like, I don't know. I mean, you've been a touring musician for a while now, so I have to imagine, does your brain adapt to that? Or to adapt to, like lack of sleep and moving time zones and all that kind of stuff?
I think you get better at it, but it's never, I think it's just a basic, lack of rest thing that will always catch up to you. But,
you collapse after a while.
Yeah. But you get a little more used to it. Don't feel as, this felt like a great, I don't know. It felt like a great tour because we were a little more stationary. We were doing residencies in cities, which I guess isn't really a thing in Europe. They were all kind of confused at the whole concept, which was great. But so we just traveled a little less and like stayed in one place a little longer for a couple days. So that was nice. It made it a little smoother for sure. But still a little long travel day yesterday.
Because my brain can function on one night of lack of sleep. And by lack of sleep, I mean like 6 hours.
Sure, yeah.
And then the next night, it's do or die.
No, you can't do more than a couple days in a row. You just start to get loopy.
Yeah. Well, I get loop. So here's how it goes. I get one good day, one lack of sleep. The next day, we're doing okay. We're doing fine. We're surviving. 2 days of no sleep. Things start to get loopy fun.
Yeah.
3 days, things start to get tired, angry.
Yeah. The loopy dark.
Yeah. Where like instead of like inspiring weird surreal thoughts, it inspires fury.
Sure.
Yeah.
I feel you. Yeah, definitely.
I was trying to imagine this morning and last night. You grew up in Laguna Beach, and that whatever that TV show was happened after I was stopped paying attention to MTV.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I was looking it up. I was like, oh, there was a TV show about this place, and then I looked at it, and I'm like, oh, some of the times she's mentioned people's names, I'm like, oh, that's where they came from. Because I'm too old and too out of whatever that pop culture area is. I like, it was never, I guess, I don't know. When I was a kid, I guess I watched MTV.
Yeah, me too. But that was right the shift like into reality. Well, they always had like the real world, but that got deep reality. I think that was one of the first like modern reality shows for sure.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say, I guess, is I have absolutely no connotation with what Laguna Beach is outside of what I read on Wikipedia last night. I have associated with nothing. I guess it's near Newport Beach, which I only know from the OC.
Yeah.
So again, my knowledge of it is a Wikipedia article or maybe some basic reality that I've gleaned from the OC, which is a teen soap opera from almost 20 years ago now. So I have no idea what the actual reality is of there. I don't know. It seems like a laid back surfing area. Also,
yeah, it's a surfy town. It's an interesting town. It's pretty like geographically isolated from the rest of Orange County a little bit. It takes a little bit to get there, and I don't know. It has a history of like an artist colony. There's still a lot of art. There's like art festivals there and stuff. So it's it's a gorgeous town.
Like lay artists, like craft people, or do you mean like well-known painters would go there to paint?
Yeah, more like painters. A lot of like beach landscapes and stuff. That seems to be the main thing now. But yeah, I mean it turned into like a wealthier community as probably I think like the 80s or something. But now I don't know. It's a really beautiful community. It's got some in common with like Newport Beach, which is a couple towns over. You get a little bit of that VOC vibe, but it's I don't know. I like it more and more as I like come back and visit. As I when you grow up, you feel a little stuck in it, like any kind of small town. But
I mean, like how small of a town is it?
I'm bad with populations, but it's
like. Did you know a lot of like? I grew up in Reading, Pennsylvania, which was about 80,000 people.
Okay.
But I grew up in the suburbs, and you kind of know the suburban area you're from, which is Exeter, and you kind of have some kind of idea of the whole geographic area.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah. Same idea. It was like, like one high school, just like one or two middle schools. Yeah, just you kind of have grown up with the same people for the whole time. So you got that small town vibe a little bit.
Is the whole place kind of upscale, shishi, or is there any kind of like economic disparity? Again, I'm imagining what I think.
Yeah.
Again, I have to. I'm from the East Coast, so I have to imagine the. I only learned the geography of places once I looked up. I'm like, oh, where does the OC take place? I started. First of all, I started rewatching it like a month or two ago on
exciting.
Hulu, so that's why it's in my head.
Yeah.
Mostly, but I'm like, oh, wait, I actually now that I live over here, I can actually see what the geography is, or I can actually put like, oh, well, this is this close to Los Angeles, or oh, I've been to Anaheim. I know that's now near Chino or whatever.
Yeah. How's it hold up? Did you watch it before?
Yeah, I watched it because when I was I was just out of college, I think, when it debuted, and I was like, I think that was the first time there was a comic loving indie rock nerd in pop culture that wasn't like a Revenge of the Nerds type. And even then, the Revenge of the Nerds types were classic nerds.
Sure.
There was no nerd of my type, of my flavor in pop culture. So that was exciting for me. You know what? Parts of it hold up.
Yeah.
It's worth, I think if you enjoy, it's not Breaking Bad, right?
No.
Right. You're not going to watch it and feel like tense. Oh, okay. Hold on. If you are a person like me and is sensitive to social interactions and social interactions going wrong and that causing a lot of tension in your body, you will feel tense.
Okay, I'll feel tense
because Seth Cohen is a jerk at points.
Okay.
So wait, are you like, for me, I will have interactions with people that are perfectly fine interactions, but then my brain will wake me up at 3 a.m. and be like, hey, did you say something to offend that person?
Yeah, of course.
And then it will plague me for weeks and maybe months later, even if I didn't say anything offensive. And if I maybe stuck my foot in my mouth, then oh boy, we're in for a real roller coaster for a couple months.
I'll often get the foot in my mouth, but even just perceiving it as, I don't know, I'm with you. I'm a 3 a.m. tripper of I don't know. It's tough. It's tough just being normal. Just being a normal human being.
Yeah, I know. That's been basically my journey in my 30s, is to learn what it is to be normal human.
Yeah.
As opposed to like a weirdo. Did you grow up as a weirdo?
Yeah. Kind of a quiet weirdo. Not really outrageous. I never drew like a lot of attention to myself, like not that kind of weirdo, but definitely like the kind of living in my head weirdo.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, that's me.
Okay.
And so my 30s has been a journey out of my head into the real world and be like, oh, what are the rules of this place?
It gets a little easier as time gets older. You care a little less.
You care a little less, and you also figure out what is the I have a I now have this filter in my head where I'm like, I will go through the weird thing and discard that and then be like, what's the normal thing? All right, someone's not going to know Bill to Spill, but they might know Billie Eilish. So
sure.
So there's the reference to use.
Oh, I see what you yeah.
So it's more about, for me, building up the filter and figuring out like what a normal person says. And that's been my 30s. Meanwhile, I stay a weird person. Was there a reason why you grew up kind of like in your head? Like, did you have friends? Did you have people that you could be yourself around?
Yeah, I always had a solid amount of friends. Not like a ton of friends. I was shy. But I would find other weirdos to hang out with for sure. No, I was lucky in that sense. Like, I don't know. I'd have a handful of people around who would we nerd out about the same stuff. And
What's that stuff?
Whether it be like,
we're talking what, like the mid 90s now?
yeah, let's see, like, well, mid 90s, like 95, I'd be like 10 years old. So, yeah, I don't know. At that time, like video games, we'd nerd out about and stuff, and starting to figure out music and our interest in music. So, a lot of like skateboarding and stuff like that, like nice Southern California culture.
I mean, what's the reality of Laguna Beach? Like, what's the Laguna Beach you grew up in? Is there some kind of like story in your mind that like typifies what the town is?
Yeah, just it just felt small in that sense of like not a ton to do as far as like going out to shows or seeing that kind of stuff, you know? But it was like pretty idyllic, very safe, and like I'd be one of the troublemakers in town for just like staying out past curfew and like going around and doing shenanigans at night and stuff. Like,
so we're talking like 1950s type.
Yeah, like nice, clean, sober fun. Yeah, shenanigans, 50 shenanigans.
Yeah, I mean, that was my youth, basically.
Yeah.
Like, none of my friends and I ever really wanted to get in actual trouble.
No.
So it was mostly like, we played a lot of sports.
Yeah.
There was a lot of like let it bounce, which is basically volleyball on a tennis court. And you could do that at night. You go to the high school, and I think the lights were on until 9 p.m., but then you could also put quarters in and turn the lights on until midnight.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That sounds like something I would be involved with.
Yeah.
Kicking a ball around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was things like that. I mean, I was always very allergic to getting in trouble because I was a good boy. And
yeah.
And even though like I think I snuck out to go see Mighty Mighty Boss Tones concert once.
Ooh.
And that didn't feel great. And I think that was the closest I ever got to like real rebellion.
Yeah. I thankfully I didn't have very like strict parents as far as like curfews and stuff. Cause yeah, I was generally a good kid too. Like the kind of trouble I'd get into would be like skateboarding on the sidewalk instead of the street or something.
Is that because you didn't want to get in trouble, or it was just like, well, that's like, for me, there was a fear of getting in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you there. As I get older, I'm like more and more paranoid about breaking any law or, yeah, it just, I don't want to talk to cops. I don't want anything to do with it, you know?
Yeah. Well, the older I get, and I learn that policing in the United States is basically a fairly racist institution, and it is that the police are mostly. This is not a blanket statement, but let's say mostly used to uphold elite power. Then I'm like, oh, it's weird. It's weird how in my lifetime it went from like the cops are always the good guys to the cops are mostly the bad guys in every story you hear.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
I want you to be on record about your feelings about policing the United States and politics.
Yeah, it's tricky. That's tricky. I mean, I'm with you there. It's a mess. The last few years have been a mess.
We're all relatively on the same side, probably. Well, I don't know. I mean, not you particularly, but is Laguna Beach a particularly conservative area?
It's pretty conservative these days. Yeah.
Was it when you were growing up?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I'd say so. More so as time went on, I think, as like it got more expensive to live there. Of course, it got more conservative. It seems to be just the way it goes. So yeah, it was pretty conservative. It was pretty like straight laced. Yeah, not. I don't know. But I found there's weirdos everywhere. So I found some weirdos to hang out with. Yeah, but
I mean, I guess the internet is really kicking off as you become a teenager.
Sure.
So is it that way? Like how do you find the weirdos? Is it just in your school?
Yeah, just in my school. Yeah, it felt very like, especially nowadays, it just, my growing up felt very like analog in that way of not, like we didn't have Facebook in high school.
Right.
It wasn't like, I was right before that generation, I guess.
Yeah, me too.
I can't imagine trying to go to school with like social media these days.
No, it seems like it's a nightmare for me as an adult.
Yeah. No, I've been staying away from it more and more. Generally, it's a nightmare.
So what class did you grow up in? What socioeconomic class were you? Like, what did your parents do for a living?
My parents did well for a living. My mom was an ER doctor. They're both retired now. So my mom was an ER doctor. My dad was like a lawyer. So
how did they end up in Laguna?
My mom grew up there. So they I was born in Santa Monica, and then moved back down there when I was 9 or 10. Yeah, just my mom grew up there, so the family's been there for a long time. We kind of like moved back into my grandma's house when my grandpa passed away.
To help take care of her?
Well, yeah, kind of. She moved like just down the street to like a small place, but I think just to be around. And it was, I think my parents always loved it as like a nice, safe place to let their kids run around. It didn't have to like keep us, felt pretty free as a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, you don't, like, the thing I'm trying to think about is like what is the foundation that allows you then to become a musician, right? That's the thing that I think about on the show. Whoever is my guest,
oh, sure.
Right? What is this kind of foundation that allows you? Because there's a little bit of rebellion in making art for a living.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you grew up kind of in this kind of idyllic place, like even the suburbs of Reading where I grew up was, I never want to move back to Reading, but I was grateful that I grew up there.
Sure.
I was grateful that I in the suburbs, Exeter they were called, and I had a good group of friends. We hung out all the time. I did well in school.
Yeah.
And there was always this kind of thing in the back of my head. Well, first of all, I didn't even know you could write for a living or do any of this stuff for a living.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
There was no one in my family that did it. This was before the internet, so there were no resources. Like, here's a path. What are kind of like the predecessors in your life, or what is the things that like eventually blossomed into you? Like, this is a thing I can do for a living, and B, there is a spark in me that wants to.
I grew up playing music from when I was young, 'cause my mom's a musician. She's like a classical musician, like a harpist and pianist.
Really?
Yeah. So, and she rips on both.
How did she get into that?
Since just when she was a kid. Yeah, she started harp and piano really young and just stuck with it. She never did it like professionally, but she would get, I think, she'd like play her way through college and stuff, like just with gigs and stuff like that. So I was started really young as a small child with like music. So there was always like a foundation there, and there's always support there. And then, yeah, I don't know. I feel like it was mostly like falling into a group of kids that, like in my later high school years, it was falling into a group of people that wanted to try to figure out how to make our own music, and just play in bands and like playing in bands that would just play like local house parties and stuff. But it was never an idea of like, I was the same way where I was like, I had no conception that it was even possible to do it full time or to even have a record, to make a record, or to have a document of what you're doing. Like it was so beyond my understanding that it just seemed impossible. So it wasn't even like really on the radar. It was just kind of like, it was very classically like just get together in a garage and bang around with some instruments and then figure it out. And then get 3 songs together and play with your friends, like play to your friends at your friend's house, that kind of thing. So it was really like organic in that way where, it just started. It started in a basement with my buddies, just playing to our buddies with no conception like out, or no big there's no master plan,
no ambition for it to be a larger thing than it was.
No. I mean, ambition in the sense of like we wanted to make the best songs we could.
Right. But there was no like, I was in a band in college, and that's when that's when it really dawned on me that I could maybe make something for a living. And I was always the one like driving everyone to professionalize what we were doing in a way.
Yeah.
Because we were good and we were getting some attention, and I'm like, oh wait, I don't have to like do the thing my parents want me to do.
Yeah.
Like I already started breaking with that at some point. I'm come from a Jewish family. So there's a knee jerk, become a doctor or a lawyer.
Okay. Sure.
There's like the kind of like, that desire for your child to be, and I get where my parents are coming from with that.
Yeah.
Like
I mean, my parents are similar way.
Did they have like a plan? Like, did you have the problem for me was I always had this kind of conception of what my parents wanted me to be that I was battling against, and I didn't have. It took a long time for me to overcome it.
Yeah.
Did they have a thing? Did they have like, even if they didn't? My parents always said like, as long as you can support yourself and you're happy, we don't care what you do. But there's always these like nonverbal kind of cues that you can pick up, or like direct things that are like, oh, they really want me to be like something they can brag about at Temple.
Yeah, well, sure. I mean, I felt a similar pressure. Yeah, pressure is maybe not the right word, because it wasn't like direct pressure, but it was definitely like, do well in school, keep your shit together, go to college and get a good job. Yeah. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because that's how they did it. And so there's not a lot of, I mean, like I said, my parents were never like too strict. Like they didn't crack the whip about me studying and everything, but I just followed that path for a long time of like doing the best I could in school, and eventually just kind of poking around in different subjects in early college years, like trying to figure out where my life was going to go. But it still wasn't like, I wasn't like, I'm going to be a rock musician. It was like, I'm going to play music. Sure. Like that's fun and stuff, but it's not a viable, it's not a path. It took a long time to have any conception that it was even possible to like pay your rent.
Yeah.
Playing music. So yeah, I felt, I mean, and my siblings, I have like 3 siblings who are all brilliant and, have, because 2 of them are lawyers now, and one of them like went through business school and has a solid job and everything. And yeah, so I'm definitely the odd man out in that sense, but I felt the same pressure.
because the other thing is like the stuff that we do is very risky. There's no guarantees that any of it will ever work out.
No.
You can have a successful project or album or whatever, and then the next thing is it doesn't. Even if it's good, even if the quality of it is good, it doesn't mean it will support you necessarily.
No, definitely not.
So where do you get because the thing for me, again, I'm just using myself to project and see what matches up with you. But the thing for me was like, I was terrified of any risks. It took me so long to be comfortable taking any kind of a risk.
Sure.
Even with like women, like I know, like asking Naomi out the first time, like early part of our relationship is very muddled because I was too scared to like just directly say something like, I like you.
I relate to that too. Yeah.
So like I don't just mean like a career risk. I mean, any kind of risk was was terrifying. So how do you get from a person who, if you are like that, I guess I'll ask first, were you like that? And then how do you get from a person who is comfortable with taking risks?
Yeah. No, I'd say I'm definitely like risk adverse in general. But I just, it took a long time for me to figure out. So I'm just always after what's gonna like keep me happy and keep me sane.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just like a long meandering process of figuring out that the thing that was going to keep me happy and sane was to play music and to do it as much as I possibly could.
Yeah.
It just took years to figure that out. It seems like such a basic, simple concept, but
no, if you have your parents' programming, right? Or you have even like this kind of social programming, which is like you come from a nice family, you should be like your siblings.
Yeah.
Become lawyers or business people or whatever, a doctor maybe, something like that. It is really difficult to break out of that.
Yeah. And I totally understand like your parents and your family, the people who love you and have supported you their whole life. They want you to, they just want you to be like happy and healthy too, but they figure one way of doing that is security.
Yeah. And
there's the other path of like no security and just following something crazy. And I fell into following a crazy idea of how to like, it's like no very little security in the sense of, or in place of just following what feels right to do.
Right. The thing that is meaningful and that fulfills you in a deeper level.
Yeah.
Than subsistence.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it is risky and it doesn't, I realize how lucky I am to like be in a position where I can spend most of my time making music and stuff. But yeah, it's still, it's more work than you'd probably think it would be in your head. Like, it's a lot of work to be a doctor or a lawyer because there's a lot of school and stuff, but, and it's just a very challenging thing to do. But, yeah, it's also hard to try to force yourself to be creative for a living and then supporting that by like traveling around for weeks at a time and, not getting enough sleep and kind of putting your sanity a little bit on the back burner to follow what you to follow what's going to keep you sane.
I mean, were you the weirdo? I mean, it seems like you were, but were you the weirdo in your family? And if so, like, how did your siblings and your parents react to that?
Yeah, I mean, I was the weirdo. I think all my whole family is, everyone has their own weird tendencies too. So like I was the weirdo, but, I wasn't, I was never like ousted. I was never, I was never exactly a black sheep. Like I was the weirdo but supported.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like when you were a kid, what did that mean, being quote unquote weird?
I think it was like spending most of my time skateboarding and doing stuff like that, opposed and listening to rock music rather than like reading a lot, like being very studious. I would read, of course, but I'd say like comparatively to the rest of my family, I'm not like a heavy reader. I was just never studious in that way. I was always just following some outside passion. So I mean, yeah.
What order are you in your siblings?
I'm second oldest. Yeah, within me and my older sister are within a year of each other. They're Irish twins.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So you're growing up kind of like in her shadow a little bit.
I guess so, yeah.
Like, are you doing this as a way? I mean, again, we're reconstructing this. Who knows, like, what you actually thought as a child? But like, were you doing this as a way to kind of differentiate yourself from her? Do you think?
I think so. I mean, if I'm a little more conscious of it, she was literally valedictorian of our school, and I was kind of like a B student. I don't know, but I always had like music in my back pocket as something that I seemed to, well, A, enjoy doing, and B, like have a knack for in some sense. But so I don't know. I always seem to choose strange hobbies, or my interests are always a bit askew from the rest of my family, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's the same for me. I don't think they know really even now how to exactly approach me. Like, sure. we have conversations about movies we've seen, yeah. Family members who have cancer, and yeah. It's not totally cold or anything like that. We're a warm family, but like there's just like a barrier you hit where we don't know how to interact with each other after a certain point.
Sure.
Because my interests diverge so much from theirs.
Yeah.
That it's just like they're like, it's like they love me, but it's Andy has his own things. We don't really understand them. They even don't understand, like, I can try to explain to them anything about showbiz, and there's still a level where they're like eyes glaze over.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And they don't exactly get it. And that's just a version of the way it was when I was a kid, and trying to explain to them what the X-Men were, or Weird Al, or something like that.
Yeah.
Where they're like, or like some comic I had drawn. Like I was a kid who drew my own comics and had adventures with all, like, combined toys from a bunch of different places to make my own adventures, and generally creating my own worlds. And it's seemingly impenetrable to them when I was a kid.
It makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel the same way. I think my parents, we relate in the sense of they're kind of fascinated by what I'm trying to do. I think it's really interesting for them to hear, from like an artist type, and how an artist type like spends their days and spends their time. I think it's interesting to them. So we relate on that sense, and my mom being a musician as well, she, I think she always, she thought about pursuing it more like as a career, but was, she's a doctor. Mm-hmm. So she kept busy with her their job and stuff. So there's a little bit of like a little like living vicariously through through those experiences. But yeah, I got lost in my own thought.
I mean, what's the dynamic of your family as you're growing up? Are you guys a emotionally open family? Are you? I describe my family as emotionally closed yet warm, if that makes sense at all.
Okay, I can relate to that. Yeah, not a lot. There wasn't a lot of talk about. Yeah, not a lot of emotion, not a lot of. I mean, there's a lot of love, maybe just not
articulated.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I can relate to that. To warm, but a little closed off.
But it made me grow up kind of with a very low emotional IQ then, where I'm not able to. It took me until therapy to like really figure like, oh, that's what that emotion is.
Yeah. No, therapy has been pretty mind expanding for those reasons too. Yeah. I mean, I get pretty, I have the interesting, I can be a little closed off emotionally, like in my life, but also write through my music about a lot of like how I'm dealing with things. So I've always had kind of both sides of that. At least I found a good outlet to like talk about the turmoil in the messy parts of my brain.
Did you always have those messy parts? Like, I think when I was a kid, I just wasn't able to, I was kind of closed off from that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't really understand what, part of the reason I also like, I don't know if I'd call this a rebellion, like trying to do this for a living, but like, I didn't want my parents' suburban lifestyle. And I didn't know why I was reacting negatively to it.
Sure.
There's something like inevitable about it, the feeling of it all. And I didn't like that. I was even in grad school, I was going to be a professor, and I could see the straight, I pictured in my brain as like a slide right on a sled into a grave. Like I could see my future ahead of me that easily. And it really, really, scared me.
Okay. Yeah.
And the fear of that, the fear of like knowing exactly how the next 40, 50 years of my life was laid out overpowered my fear of the riskiness of doing this stuff.
Yeah. That's a good way. That's an interesting way of putting it. Yeah.
So were you aware, were you conscious of this kind of like the messy parts of your brain, and of the messy parts of your emotional spectrum when you were younger?
A little less so. I mean, I tap into it more so as an adult. Like, I think it was when I was 18 when I finally kind of figured out that that my brain felt a little scrambled, or just emotionally a little strange. That's where when I finally moved away from home and got out of my little Laguna Beach bubble, my emotional world kind of opened up too and kind of exploded. And I figured out like I've had some bit of depression, anxiety issues. Mm-hmm. Like maybe a lot of my shyness growing up was like depression, or there was it took a long time. I wasn't really like in touch with what was going on. I'm still trying to like figure out how I'm feeling all the time. It's just messy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when you grow up, I describe it, I have a line that I'm not on the spectrum, but I grew up on the spectrum, or was raised on the spectrum, so that I don't really have a full understanding of my emotions. And so now as an adult, I have to go back and like really, I mean, that's lucky that you kind of like figured this stuff out at 18 a little bit. It took me another 10 years after
Oh my gosh, yeah.
to start.
I mean, that's when it started. When I started figuring it out, definitely.
Was it just moving away? Was there some kind of thing that happened where you're like, oh, I gotta start figuring out what's going on in my brain?
I think it was just realizing that I was gonna have to figure this all out. Like I was gonna have to find a path, and it just like freaked me out because I was pretty like aimless.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been a little aimless in the sense of like it's not clear to me. There's a lot of open doors to like. There's a lot of ways to approach this life, or I was never clear on where my path was, I guess. So I just knew it just took me a while to figure out like you're gonna have to live like a creative life to be emotionally like satisfied, or be emotionally like what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know.
I think I know where you're talking about. I mean, I don't know if this is the same thing for you, but what I know when I was in grad school, and even before that, there was like this anger in me, and I didn't know where the anger was coming from. I was just an angry person, not like all the time, but it was like it was there, and I was smart enough not to like let it out, like most of the time. But when I figured out what I wanted to do, and I kind of like satisfied that existential part of myself.
Yeah,
that's when the anger started to dissipate.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I feel that angst for sure. And it was so much heavier before I figured out like I'm just gonna spend my time trying to write better songs. You know? Yeah. That angst, that anger is. Yeah, it's very real. It's very like, I felt that it just came out in strange ways. It would come out in like kind of self-destructive like ways, I guess. Just I don't know. It was more like beating myself up for
Oh, like you would turn it on yourself.
Yeah.
Mine was definitely things like I would like kick the garbage can in my room or something like that. It was like it came out as like a physical, not to like I wouldn't turn it on other people.
No.
But there were, I mean, not like physically, but like I remember yelling at like my bandmates once when like something, they weren't taking it as seriously as I was.
Sure. Yeah.
And it took me a long time to like be like, maybe you don't turn it on other people, Andy. Maybe you don't yell at don't yell at your friends.
No, it happens. I think everyone like freaks out at their friends about something that's completely about just within their own. It's something they have to deal with like on their own in their own journey, you know?
Yeah, well, because I hadn't exactly figured out what I wanted, and I was hoping like this was the thing that would force me to tell my parents, no, look, we're succeeding at this, so I obviously can't stay in college anymore.
Yeah, sure.
Right? Do you know what I mean? Like I could point to something as opposed to just taking that risk.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, but I couldn't articulate. Again, this is like 10 years later or whatever, and I'm like I'm now able to articulate it. At the time, it was just like a mishmash of feelings that was there without there being any kind of like definition to them.
Oh my gosh, yeah, definitely. Just a lot of confusing, like strong feelings. And I would tend to turn them inward and just kind of beat myself up and like, what are you doing? Or like we were talking on earlier, like, why'd you say that? That kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, when do you start to figure that stuff out? Was it just once you started to play music for real, or was it for real? I mean, like as your main thing, or was it therapy, or was it some other thing that helped you figure it out?
Therapy is relatively new for me, as in like 3 years or so.
Yeah.
So a lot of it was just kind of. I mean, I'd work a lot of those feelings out through songwriting and just writing down my thoughts and my. I think that's why my music has always been really pretty personal in that sense. Is me just kind of exploring that side of my brain and trying to figure it out.
Oh, that's interesting. So it was like all these feelings are in me. I'm not able to get them out any other way. They have to get out some way.
Yeah, it feels right for them to come out in some way.
Yeah, it's interesting that you had that. I'm thinking about people who don't have that kind of release valve.
Sure.
And how, like, the weird ways that your emotions can come out.
Yeah.
If you don't have some kind of... Because even when I was making music, and in the first couple of years I was doing comedy, I was too... scared to like actually talk about my emotions and that stuff, or I was too scared that if I did, people would be like, "What a weirdo."
Yeah.
And so all that stuff, like I was and am a huge Pavement fan.
Sure. Yeah.
So like all my writing, all my lyrics would be kind of obscured.
Yeah. I mean, that's having that like lyrical obscurity. You can open the release valve in that way. It's just a little more cryptic.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like lyrics kind of being a little nonsensical or very abstract, like that has its purpose too. You can sometimes it's easier and it feels nice to kind of obscure your like pretty raw emotional thought into more obscure lyrics.
Well, there's plausible deniability. Someone can say, if you're embarrassed about the emotions, like I'm very embarrassed about emotions. It's less and less as I get older, but like it's still there. I'm embarrassed about having emotions and feeling things.
Sure, yeah.
So you can say like, well, I wasn't really like, you can interpret those lyrics however you want. And even if someone guesses what you were actually feeling, you can be like, well, that's not really what I was.
Well, that's not me. That's your interpretation. Even if they nail it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. What was were there any kind of bands when you were in high school that turned that key for you? Like it was really Pavement for me, I think. That like turn like, oh, I kind of want to create stuff. This is something I like this band so much.
Yeah.
That it makes me want to create things.
You know, I think for me it was a little later. I think one of the first bands that really connected with me in the sense of like maybe I can create something like this was Neutral Milk Hotel.
Oh yeah.
I think the production quality of kind of the very DIY kind of but very interesting production value and very strange instrumentation and you can tell there's so much like emotional intensity in it, even if it's more abstract or it's like it's being told through the story of like a story of Anne Frank or something. Like it that was one of the first, and I was somebody showed it to me when I was 18. And that was one of the first times I was like, oh, maybe I could actually pick up a guitar and like try to do this. Plus, like his voice seemed very. It took me a while to like get past his voice, but once I connected with it, I was like, oh, it's so cool that he's just like being totally himself and like he's belting this
Yeah.
out, but he doesn't have a very traditional. He doesn't have like a traditionally good singing voice, and like, you know, that could be me too. You know, it's kind of like the punk mentality of like you can. It seemed accessible. It seemed like it was an interesting way of expressing oneself that seemed it seemed doable, or it seemed like reproducible.
Well, Neutral Milk, specifically in the Airplane Over the Sea, seems to me a perfect marriage of like the kind of emotional thing that I personally always wanted, and the abstractness that I could use to protect myself.
Yeah,
and that's what what drew me to them specifically, because like I'd been listening to like Pavement and, you know, all your indie rock bands, your Super Chunks and your Yo La Tangos and Archers Aloft and stuff like that, but I think it was them, and they all have their own. That you can turn the faders up on those two things, emotion and abstractness, on all those bands, but there's something specific. I get what you're saying. There's something specific about In the Airplane Over the Sea that like it's the perfect marriage of those things.
Yeah, it was so like dramatic in an interesting way. It just seems so intense. You could tell it was a lot more intense than a lot of music I'd heard before, just because it felt like very pure, very pure and abstract in a way, but like still you could. I think I connected to it the same way I connected to like Nirvana when I was a young kid.
Yeah,
where I was like, when I was 10 years old, like I can't understand what he's talking about, but I know like there's something amazing about what he's talking about, or he's really talking about it. Like he's figured out like he's figured out like a really intense and raw way to express whatever he's trying to express. Even if it's like, you know, and then you put your own expression into it. Or you put your own interpretation into it, so that you can like kind of, you can interject your own feeling into that abstractness to like to connect with. So yeah, it was just like that very raw form of expression, I guess.
Yeah, it's something I couldn't do, but want to do.
Yeah, I think it's admirable to like. I think that's why that record, like In the Airplane Over the Sea, means so much to people. Is like you can tell it's such a successful purge of some kind of emotion or some kind of expression. Is very like he nailed what he was trying to do in a very specific way.
Yeah. And in a way, this is here. Let me see if this makes sense. He turned his emotions into art in a way that like there are bands. I love Superchunk because Mac McCaughan writes about his emotions in a fairly direct way that that gets straight to, and he articulates things that I don't hear in other like songs about relationships.
Sure.
And that like I'm like, oh yeah, I've never heard that before. I identify with that. It really gets to the center of my heart in a certain way. But I don't. But there's something in the way Jeff Mangum did it that like elevated it in a certain way. And it's like, oh, I can spin the stuff inside me into something more.
Yeah.
That it doesn't just connect with people, but it also like it is. There's something deeper about it too.
Really created like his own world, like to filtered all his emotional turmoil, or creating art in the sense of like creating like a space to live in. And
For a kid, I don't know if this makes sense to you, but like for a kid who lived in his head, I still live in my head now. But like when I was a kid, and like this, it's the perfect thing of what I wanted to do. It's just build a world that I could live in, and that other people could live in as well. Yeah,
it's. I like the escapist nature of that. Of like, when you're living in your head, and a lot of what I'm trying to do is like create my own world. If I make a record or something, I want to create a little world for those songs to live in, and to hopefully like bring people into that little world, you know?
Yeah.
In the same way that Neutral Milk Hotel like did it so successfully, like completely, it just sounds like its own universe, and it has its own strange rules, and like I mean, that I think that's like my that's always a goal of making a record or something, is creating that world. Yeah,
that actually seems like a nice place to end.
All right,
how do you feel?
I feel good. Yeah. A little spacey. I hope I wasn't too spacey and strange.
No, I don't. I never know how someone will react exactly to, the themes of the show and things like that. So I was just like to check in at the end and make sure.
No, I'm with you. I think we think in similar ways.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for coming over, especially after incredible jet lag.
No, it's okay.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it was my pleasure. It's awesome.
And we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, oh, 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 bye.